Welcome back to GWK, your geeky podcast that occasionally records and releases stuff. I know it's been a while. And now you're going to get a bunch because we had the MLB 23 review come out. We have this, which is the Mando and Picard review. And then I have a Last of Us one, part 1 PC review coming out really soon. So, nice. Yeah, you're going to get more than enough of us now. Oh, hi, I'm Eric. I'm going to be joined this week by Hawk and Shows. How's it going, guys?
Pretty good.
It's going all right.
Yeah,
a lot of season 3 stuff to talk about today.
There's a lot of season 3. And in the same week, 2 big shows just decided to end. So
almost competing franchises.
They are definitely competing franchises. They've always been.
I'm waiting for the crossover.
Although I like both of them. Why not both? Why not both? This is a perfect time for me to cut in that little meme. Well, will I? Unlikely. So, so like we were saying, the 3rd season of both The Mandalorian and Picard came out just this past week. And they were both quite, how do I say this? Chef kiss. At least I enjoyed it. Let's do a non-spoiler review for both right now. Like a quick 2-3 sentence thing. Hawk, what'd you think of, let's start with Mandalorian. What'd you think this season?
Mandalorian returning for season 3 gave me things I didn't know I wanted when I started watching it. And by the end I was hooked. It had so many great turns and twists, and a lot of times I drew upon references to Star Wars and that people don't think of, beyond the movies and that. Like, there was a lot of episodes that felt very Clone Wars-y to me, and I dug it.
Yeah. All right. Shows.
Okay, so I'm going to go from the perspective of someone who didn't watch Clone Wars, and I was a little bit bored with Mandalorian season 3.
Did you watch Rebels?
I did not.
Okay.
See, this is why you were bored. You don't do the homework.
Right? And it's not that I didn't enjoy me some Mandalorian. For me, it was just more Mandalorian. It could have just been all one big season for me. It could have, like, if it had just gone season 1, 2, and 3 all as one season, it wouldn't have really felt all that different to me. But I don't think I was getting a lot of the little references that were coming in. I know because I watched New Rock Stars and things like that, I was able to pick up some of the references that were there, but I wasn't as geeked out as I think I would have been if I was in the shoes that you guys have with knowing all of that background knowledge.
That's interesting. We should talk about that, because I was wondering how people who don't know these characters or what's leading this, like where this came from and where it's leading to, what they thought of this season. We'll talk about that when we get to The Mandalorian.
Sounds good.
I loved it. Unequivocally, I loved it. I love Star Wars. I think Rebels and Clone Wars are the best Star Wars things that have ever come out.
So then I'm missing out then.
I really like the original trilogy. I like some of the prequels, but Clone Wars and Rebels tied those two together and they actually made the prequels better, which is not a thing.
It's strange, right?
Yeah.
Because there seems to be this kind of thing where we talk about the sandbox, it's like all the toys in the sandbox. And I think the same thing applies to Star Trek too. Where failures of certain projects and that can kind of get revamped into like the, new stuff.
Exactly. And speaking of revamped, what did you think of Picard season 3?
Oh man, I loved this season of television. Even with even despite flaws here or there, nothing about it ever detracted my enjoyment week by week, episode by episode. I thought it was the perfect send off, for not just Picard and that, but for the TNG crew as well.
Yep. Shows.
I have to echo Hawk's sentiments exactly. Like, it was beyond incredible. Now, this was a situation where I was able to get all of the mini references and all of the background little winks and nods at us as an audience, as Star Trek The Next Generation fans. And so I was definitely, really able to appreciate those things and had a big smile every time something happened. Every time we saw a character show up for a cameo or something referenced from TNG, like it was so good. And it just had me so excited about the next episode week by week. Perfect Star Trek. What
can I add to either of those, right? I think I think it might be my favorite season of Star Trek ever.
Which is saying a lot, right?
There's a lot of seasons of Star Trek. It was the perfect way of taking something that was really good already. That's the TNG seasons and the movies and the crew, building upon that legacy and making it even better, which I cannot say about the first 2 seasons of Picard. This season, you don't need to watch the first 2 seasons at all. They may say 2 or 3 things, not important. Doesn't matter. It doesn't deter from.
Although I read something really cool online where they said that season 1 and 2 was really the building up Raffi's character arc. Like you really needed to get season 1 and 2 to get Raffi's character arc. And then they just this tweet described all of Voyager and seasons 1 and 2 of how Seven got to where she's going to be at the end of season 3. So if you sort of look at it that way, it's almost like how you said that Clone Wars and Rebels sort of made the prequels a little better. Mm-hmm. It's like if you look at the end game for Star Trek Picard, you can almost appreciate seasons 1 and 2 a little bit more for where they led us.
No. It's funny.
I must be wrong.
No. I'm saying I'm not saying that's wrong.
Get out of the chat, Josh.
You need a big X that appears like
it's funny because my older sister didn't watch Voyager or the first 2 seasons of Picard, and she really likes Seven and Raffi. So I wonder, like, do you appreciate these characters more after watching that? But I feel like even so, these characters were so fleshed out this season. Like Raffi's arc this whole season was way better than the first 2 seasons combined.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. No, she was perfect.
And all the stuff with her family was like all the drama in the first season. That was all of her drama of first season. Yeah. Was literally one episode in this 3rd season where she talks to her ex-husband. Mm-hmm. Right? Like we find out all of that drama in one little spot. Anyway, it's hard not to just straight go into Picard right now because I want to talk about The Mandalorian because that finished first. And because I wrote that out in full in the outline, and so I figured this will be the easier one to chat about. We'll just do it in a nice like little roundout. We'll go Hawk, Shouse, then me. But really, I don't want to go through it episode by episode because that is not deserving of this story. The story is long.
So this is the spoilery part of.
This is the spoiler. If you haven't seen this, go away.
And then come back.
But if you want to go to Picard, I will put the time code somewhere. Or just fast forward, you'll see it. So this season came out. It started on March 1st and ended on April 19th. Standard, 8-episode season for The Mandalorian. And we see a return of Din Djarin and Grogu, the little Yoda-like species. We still don't know the name of that species, which I'm fine with not knowing.
Lucas doesn't even know the name of it.
Yeah.
It's still Baby Yoda.
Yeah.
So
they tried to give him a name, but it's still Baby Yoda.
So what we found out in the last 2 seasons is that because of situations, Mando had taken off his helmet, and that is against the rules for his sect, his tribe of Mandalorians. Oh, I just hit my microphone. So
Children of the Watch.
So if you didn't watch the Book of Boba Fett, there was a really important episode where he finds out that he needs to redeem himself by bathing in the waters of Mandalore. Unfortunately, Mandalore was destroyed by the Imperials after they tried to, become a power.
Now, did that happen in Clone Wars?
That happened in between Rebels and the movie. So we never saw this happen. The first time we ever heard about it or saw it was on this show.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there are rumors that Mandalore is poisoned. So, Mando's like, my helmet doesn't protect that. I need a robot to go down there. And really the first bit of this season was him trying to find a guide or a helper. And he wanted IG-11, which was the assassin droid we met last year, voiced by Taika Waititi. But instead we got R5, which was the little droid in episode 4 that blew its motivator, and Bo-Katan from Rebels. What'd you guys think of this little redemption arc of the Mando, and how it started not on this show?
I know, yeah. I imagine a lot of people who didn't check out Book of Boba Fett because, it just wasn't that good, except for the Mandalorian episodes.
That was the best part of that whole episode.
Yeah, that was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, right?
Who directed the best episode of this season, too.
Exactly. So yeah, it's like if you're just jumping into season 3 and that Mando is on a religious quest and that to redeem himself in the eyes of the Children of the Watch and the armor and that for removing his helmet, which he openly confessed to in those episodes of the Book of Boba Fett. So that gives us our starting point, and then the first episode was almost like a getting to know you, reacquaintance.
Getting to know all about you.
He revisits Navarro, his old stomping ground from season 1, which looks a lot different now, with all the economy and the niceness and the little bands.
It's really interesting to see the Outer Rim succeeding, because from what we've known from Star Wars, at least everything that we've ever seen or heard about the Outer Rim, like Tatooine, is like the Wild West. So it's always, and I think that's what George Lucas wanted when he was creating this world. He wanted this Wild West-esque sector,
this lawless area.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was also rich economically in that, because they needed like stopping grounds from their trade routes.
It's like the Expanse and the Belters, right? They had all the water and all of that, but that didn't go to the.
Didn't Carl Weathers specifically call miners in the Outer Rim Belters?
He did.
Yes.
Goddamn. This is why everyone needs to watch The Expanse. Did you watch The Expanse yet, Shows?
Not yet. Working on it.
Chows.
Well, now I got to go back and watch Clone Wars and Rebels first.
I would say watch Expanse first, to be honest. I'm at that point like that. The Expanse is probably my favorite sci-fi. Anyway, sorry, Hawk.
So yes, that was episode 1. Was our getting reacquainted in that, and I know a few people were a bit miffed in that, but like every time I'm dropped into that world and that, I'm there and I'm watching and that, and I don't care if anything didn't happen in the episode and that. I was just really happy to be back there, because I knew good things were coming next.
Fair. And then Bo-Katan ends up becoming the shepherd, not just.
Yeah, it was weird because you first see her in that. It's like, and you remember the whole conflict in that where Mando won the Dark Blade from Moff Gideon in season 2, and obviously was told the truth about the blade, that it in itself didn't have much in the way of power, and that it was the story behind it that held power for the Mandalorians and that. So I was immediately assuming that the whole season was going to build up to a conflict between the two of them.
And it didn't. That's okay. Shuss, what did you watch the Book of Boba Fett?
I did.
You did. That's
and I really liked it.
Did you?
Yeah.
Like we say really liked it.
No, I really liked the Boba Fett backstory stuff, like the stuff with him and the.
I enjoyed that part of it.
Me too. I just thought it was clunkily put together, so it was sort of weird. Like I wish it was chronological, because the flashbacks in the modern day did not make sense. Like there was no reason to have the flashbacks and the. Anyway, that's another.
I wish I had talked to you guys about that when that show would come out, because I felt that it felt kind of I don't know, felt kind of cheap putting the Mandalorian in it. Like I almost wanted it to just be able to stand on its own 2 feet.
We agreed.
But that's a different discussion.
I think we actually when we did the review of the Book of Boba Fett, we exactly said that. Like it was the part where people are like, well, I guess we need to keep people watching the last couple episodes because we sort of screwed the pooch with the first 7. Let's bring Mando in. And the best episode, like it's bad when the best episode is an episode that doesn't have Boba Fett in it. Like that's not good.
Yeah, I think the problem with Book of Boba Fett was just kind of the tonal change in the character of himself. It's like they wanted to redeem him and that, make him like a good guy in the hearts of people and that, it's like as kids who grew, like us who grew up, that Boba Fett was a bad guy and that, but even still, he was like one of our favorite bad guys, despite like having about roughly 10 minutes worth of footage within the entirety of the prequels.
But it wasn't the original
trilogy.
It wasn't even the tonal change from the original trilogy and then the series, because when Boba Fett came back in Mando season 2, he was still a badass. He just didn't have his armor, and I don't know. It just seemed,
and that was part was missing in that. Which was surprising because like that episode was directed by Robert Rodriguez, and in season 2 of Mando, and he did an amazing job of like kind of showing like the differences. Like Mando, is the gunslinger, right? But like Boba Fett was a barbarian.
Yeah, he was brutal. Like,
yeah,
there's a reason why stormtroopers ran from him.
Yes.
Sorry, Shaus. I cut you off from Mando seeking redemption and ending up with Bo-Katan.
So I guess, I mean, I know we're probably going to be skipping all over the place a little bit, but I guess I was hoping that this series was going to lead to him eventually leaving this cult group, this Children of the Watch. I thought the
same thing.
And I thought by the end of the season, his mask was just going to be straight up off. I actually thought we were going to see the armorer with her mask off too, but
I agree.
You know what I mean? None of that particularly happened. It almost seemed like it went the other direction, where everybody kind of folded into the way, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I don't know. I think it was like almost like, because from what we understand in that, it's like these factions were so splintered, ideologically and religiously, and that they just refused to interact with each other. And the whole point wasn't that they kind of folded themselves into the Children of the Watch's ideology, and that it's almost like the Children of the Watch came to accept that, like, other Mandalorians, did not hold their same beliefs in that. It's like they could, but at the same time, they were still considered Mandalorians.
I find that interesting because this whole season has had a lot of religious overtones. They even named a lot of the episodes based on religious terms.
The apostate.
Yeah.
Sorry, one sec.
Yeah, there's a bunch.
The apostate, the convert, the foundling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But like, could you imagine if, say, the Pope all of a sudden was like, you know what? Everyone who believes in Jesus, we're cool with you now. All of you.
Yeah.
That would never happen. But that's sort of what happened if, Bo-Katan became the Pope.
It almost felt political too. Like it almost made me think of, like, say, American politics, for example, with the Democrats and the Republicans. Like it almost felt like you have your far left and your far right.
I could see
with regard to the different ways the Mandalorians were thinking. So I was kind of getting a bit of a political vibe to it, but he definitely stuck to his convictions. He wanted redemption within that group, and he wasn't going to be sort of strayed from it, even though people were trying to convince him, like Bo-Katan were trying to convince him that it wasn't necessary.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if he will eventually keep his helmet off for, say, like a movie, because he does seem like he's calmed down. I know I'm going to jump to the end right now. Grogu and Mando get their own place, and since he does adopt him, I assume he can take off his helmet around his child.
Because we've had some not in depth, but some casual conversations about Mandalorian rituals and customs, and that when is it appropriate? It's like when they're, when two Mandalorians love each other and want to make a baby, and that it's like, do they have?
They take still off the bottom armor, keep the helmets on.
Their helmets are tinging together.
The way I saw it, though, is that the custom that their relationships dictate, like when and they can take it off, and that because we obviously see that they do have customs about it, and that in the fireside, when they were eating their dinners, every one of them would go away, not to some separate corner, and take their helmets off and to be in private. But if they're two people who are connected by family, I think that's the exception to the rule.
I do like that we did see that the first time when Bo-Katan was taking them on that dragon hunt, and then later on when the Night Owls joined everyone, and like some of them were like, all the Night Owls were eating together, and all the Night Watch people just fucked off, or Death Watch people fucked off and had to eat by themselves. Like it's such an interesting comparison between these two religious sects. I loved seeing the religious aspect of this. Like every time we've talked about Star Wars, like in the past, it's always just been like, here's this Jedi religion, and they're either really good or really bad. So that that there are people that are in that gray, but there are varieties of gray. I think that's fascinating.
For sure.
And see, this is why you have to watch Clone Wars shows, because like there's a whole section of this devoted to Mandalore and that and what was happening at the time during before the Revenge of the Sith.
And not even that, there are varieties of Jedi who are like, maybe both the Jedi and the Sith are too far extreme. Like there should be this middle ground where, you don't go too goody and don't go too psycho. Like you need a balance. And really when what we learned in the original trilogy is that they've always needed a balance in the Force. So why take one extreme or the other? Like that's a good thing for people who use the Force to understand. Even more interesting. Sorry, I'm just gonna go off on random tangents.
We're talking Star Wars, dude.
Tangents is probably better than going episode by episode.
I don't want to do it episode by episode.
Yeah.
We've seen the trailer for Ahsoka now, right? And we've seen 2 dark Jedi that don't have red lightsabers. They have orange lightsabers. So they haven't fully gone to the dark side. Because to make a lightsaber, this is canon, they take a pure kyber crystal and they bleed it using the dark side. And that's why you get the pure red. It's because you bleed it with the dark side of the Force. But orange is someone who hasn't gone all the way to the dark side. So we don't know what happens there. White lightsabers, on the other hand, are someone who took a red lightsaber and purified it. So,
neat. I did not know that.
Or cleaned it. I don't know if it was purified is the right word.
Because like the red, when the kyber crystal is turned red, that's the rage of the user, and that has been bled into it.
Yeah, and I guess when you purify it or you clean it, you sort of calm it down. It just sort of is at peace. I like that. That's such a nice way of. Anyway, Shells, I cut you off about Bo-Katan.
No worries. That's Let's have a conversation here. But I mean, what I found really interesting was the line that Bo-Katan said when she talked about how nobody could defeat Mandalore. It was that powerful. Yeah. That no one could defeat it. That it had to be defeated from within. And so it makes me want to go back and look at and see. Yeah, what was the Mandalorian Empire?
It's so interesting when you get in Clone Wars, because you see that there are sects of Mandalore that have gone total peace. Like they don't believe in they're pacifists, and the Mandalorians have always been a war raging society. Like they base everything, their religion, on battle. That's why their armor is like that, right?
It was Bo-Katan's sister in that,
and her father,
Empress Satine.
Yeah.
And that she was the one who led the pacifist movement of Mandalore, which became the predominant kind of ideological governing body. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. And Shells, you'll appreciate this. Empress Satine was named Satine and designed as Satine because of Moulin Rouge.
Okay.
And you know who played Obi-Wan in the prequels? Ewan McGregor, who played Satine's lover in Moulin Rouge. So there's I won't tell you what happens to Satine, but I think you can probably figure it out based on Moulin Rouge.
Yeah. But you also get in Clone Wars, you also find out about what Death Watch is about. And it's like they were the sector that kind of spawned the Children of the Watch that we know from Mandalorian. Yeah. Mandalorian.
And then we also find out a lot more about the religion. We find out about the Mythosaur, which were these city-wide monsters that used to be on Mandalore, and their rite of passage was them trying to ride one, right? Take it over, and that's why the crest is the Mythosaur skull. And the season.
And so the idea that there's still one alive, at least one alive on the planet, is a.
And that was, I think that was probably the most surprising thing of this whole season for me, was seeing that a Mythosaur was still alive, because they had gone extinct I want to say thousands and thousands of years ago, if not a millennia before. It's crazy.
Because the city had, the cities had expanded, their technology expanded, and that. So a lot of the natural landscape of Mandalore was gone, and that replaced by huge Coruscant cities.
Yeah, dome cities, just because of how much war had been going on, and the tribes had always been at war. And so when Satine had calmed the tribes and created peace, that was the first time they had really sat down. And a lot of people didn't think that it would last. And obviously it didn't, because they got bombed to shit. And now Bo-Katan is sort of in this place where she's sort of becoming the leader of Mandalore again. I don't at the beginning of the season, I sort of felt like she was sort of just positioning herself, like elbowing herself into it.
Yeah.
But I think that it just sort of fit for her because she knew the political aspects of everything, like both sides, like the armorer said that she walks both worlds. And she knew what to do for all these people. Like out of everyone,
she was in that castle. Was she by herself at that castle?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
was she in exile or something?
No, that was her family's home.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or at least one of them, from what I understand.
I think it's her family's like home where they were from.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when they had taken over Mandalore, or when they had, taken over Mandalore, they moved down to the main cities.
Okay.
But that would have had all the Mandalores that we saw later, but they sort of abandoned her. What did you think of this idea? We sort of touched upon it, but her walking the two worlds, like her being able to be the one that would unite everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was important. Everybody talked about like nothing really happened in the first episode and that, but like it did reintroduce Bo-Katan in that, and she was at a very low point in her life in that because she had lost everything in that. She didn't have the Darksaber in that. Her troops kind of abandoned her and turned into mercenaries. So when Mando approached her in that, there was literally nothing going on in her life in that, and I think she was at a crossroads. So unknowingly, like this season kind of became about not just his redemption in that, but like her redemption as far as like, expanding her worldview and that, not just missing like the Children of the Water as just crazy zealots and that, but actually walking among them once they found out that she was, cleansed too by the waters of Mandalore, and learning that she could make she could make new alliances among her own people and that, and realizing that as someone who walked both worlds and that, she was kind of the linchpin. She was the instrument in bringing them all back together. Because as she says, they were more powerful together than they were like as separate tribes. And by the end of the series and that, we see, how very true this is.
I think that when she first decided to join Din Djarin to go to the what do they call it? The convent, the culvert?
The culvert.
When he took her there, I could tell that she was hesitant to go and be around them, and they were hesitant to have her sort of among them.
Mm-hmm.
But it showed that she was a strong leader because she still was willing to accept who they were. And even though she didn't plan to wash herself in the living waters, she ended up washing herself in the living waters. So she was welcomed by them. And I think that's what allowed her to sort of have a foothold in that world. And then from that, she was able to connect to the other. It was neat because I think a lot of people in that role, in that position, might have been a little bit too arrogant to maybe agree to go to be with this cult who have beliefs that she doesn't follow, but still she needs to find a way to connect with them.
Mm-hmm.
And plus, on top of it, I mean, like, she saw like what she considered a miracle, and she probably didn't fully understand it at the time, and that the mythosaurs were not all extinct in that, and that she didn't see one.
I wonder if it's like one of those religious awakenings, like people like that find religion. There's just like it just.
They saw Jesus in a piece of toast.
Yeah, and then she just sort of like she questioned everything. Like it's
like what
I can't
alcoholics
imagine
refer to as a moment of clarity.
Yeah, very. Like I can't add anything to that. Anyway, what I think one of my favorite parts in this series is that they harken back to Andor, that we find out what's happening with people on the ground level. And so we go back to Coruscant, we find out that all the Imperials that have been captured have either gone to jail, like Moff Gideon, or they're getting reconditioned to be put back into, working society. While they have a mark on themselves, a little red A, which is very on the nose. Yep. So I thought that was really interesting. I like that the idea would be some people were saying that this is like, I think Dave Filoni said that if the Nazis had gone to Argentina and started building up again, this is what they sort of would have been doing. Like they've been living in society, but they would also be, backhandedly doing other things. And we get to see that with the New Republic. They're sort of they're often being all cocky and being like, we know what we're doing. And we see that with some of the aristocrats, right? And we end up finding Imperials are spying and doing their thing to rebuild the Empire. What'd you guys think of this? It was totally separate from the rest of the series, but I thought
this was so cool. I mean, like we watched an entire episode with two like kind of secondary characters, one of whom we just like seen basically like so very briefly in season 2, and that played by Katie O'Brien. Oh God, I'm blanking on the name. Elia Kane.
Yeah.
And a whole episode devoted to her and to Dr. Pershing and that, who we were introduced to in season 1, and that as a geneticist, doctor, and that who was experimenting on Grogu for at the behest of Moff Gideon.
And he has the cloning patches on him, right? So he was a cloner.
Yeah. What is so fascinating is that we kind of see how, like, the expression, it's like meet the new boss, same as the old boss.
Yeah.
Yeah. That the New Republic and that, while it purported to be on the side, the side of like peace and prosperity and goodness in the galaxy, and that it employed a lot of tactics and that were very imperial-like,
so much bureaucracy.
Bureaucracy, surveillance, monitoring of citizens, right? Yeah. And then ultimately in that one, back to Pershing and that straight into his old ways, we find that they employ
torture.
Torture, but under the guise of medical rehabilitation.
Oh, that's what freaked me out, man.
Just really, I know. That episode was amazing in that, not just in the fact that story writing and like it was great kind of independent Star Wars show in that, but there were so many callbacks in that to old sci-fi shows and other movies that like I think when we were doing our watch party, and we kind of like that coat was a reference to Blade Runner. The torture scene at the end was a big homage to Brazil
and Clockwork Orange.
Oh yes, absolutely, the Ludovico technique.
Yep. Man, shows.
Yeah, that was cool. So I watched that episode with my fiance, and she had never seen any Mando, so that was the first episode that she saw of it.
Mm-hmm. Wow!
And she asked me, she said, "What's going on? Who are all these characters?" And I said, "Well, that's the interesting part. This is sort of taking us off on a little bit of a side story." Mm-hmm. And she got sort of hooked on it a little bit. She ended up watching the whole rest of the series with me, nice. which I was excited about because she normally doesn't enjoy these kind of things. But it was really neat to see sort of what was going on. I was curious about the characters themselves, and what happened at the end with the Mind Flayer. I thought that there was something more nefarious going on there. Like I thought that she might have been trying to reprogram him or something like that. It just appears to me now that she was just trying to kill him.
I don't think he died. I think he might have just gotten...
but she was kind of punishing him, and because of the perceived portrayal to Moff Gideon and that, But it's eerie in the fact that she was reminding him that the Empire was still there and still watching.
Isn't that terrifying?
Yeah.
This idea that he was part of that group that was like the whole story starting to come together through all the seasons of Mandalorian. That why was he even going after Grogu in the first place? And then you find out later in the season that with regard to these clones that they're trying to clone the ability in to manage to utilize the Force, and like it was just neat watching that, and then realizing maybe she also wanted to erase his mind, because if he was the only one that knew how to do that, maybe he might, be able to help the New Republic or something find a way to get around that.
Yeah. I see. I wonder about that as well. Like she was Moff Gideon's person. Like she was straight up not for any of the other Imperials. And we find out that Moff Gideon was not working on Project Resurrection, which was the project to clone the Emperor and bring him back, right? He had his own, like, I want to make myself into force sensitive,
which is
clone.
crazy.
And so, like, that's an amazing.
Okay, now did he die at the end of this season? Because
that's a good question. Let's talk about him in a second.
Yeah.
I just want to do a 2-3 second, because what you guys thought about the Jack Black, Lizzo, Christopher Lloyd episode, because we don't have to talk about it, but I know that a lot of people were sort of pissed off about it. I loved that episode. I thought it was a cool CSI episode that showed another side of the world. I like when they build the world instead of us having to go back to Tatooine over and over again. That's my thoughts on it, Hawk.
Again, it was a side quest episode, and I think I kind of pissed people off. I also think they got kind of pissed off. It's like, why is Lizzo in this?
Lizzo was awesome.
Lizzo was great.
Because she took a DNA test.
Was she a great actor? Was she a great actor? Maybe not. Did she look the part? Yes. With those fabulous flowing peacock feathers and that. And
oh man,
she just looked and Jack Black. It's who is pretty much just a few pixels shy of an animated character himself.
He is, yeah. And then Christopher Lloyd, right?
Yeah, Christopher Lloyd. Probably Christopher Lloyd may have been the most disappointing part of it, not just because it's the man is in his 80s.
Everyone sort of expected him to go bad because it was Christopher Lloyd.
Yeah, exactly.
Just took a bit part? No.
Was it a bad episode? No. It was a lot of fun in that. And as I mentioned before, this is one of the reasons it's like this harkened back to like the Clone Wars. It felt like a Clone Wars episode.
Yeah.
You meet this odd civilization and that, that we may run into them again, we may not, but it made for a fun episode, and people really need to lighten up.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Shows.
The question actually came up from my fiance. She's like, "What is going on here?" She enjoyed seeing the cameos, but she was like, "Where's Darth Vader? Where's Luke Skywalker and all that stuff?" And it brought a good discussion around this sort of world building that's been happening in Star Wars, which we seem to have a lot more excitement these days for these stories that take place in the Star Wars universe that are not part of the mainstream movies.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because there's so much to that universe that we want to learn more. We want to learn how people live. We want to learn every single planet has its own stories, its own civilization, its own traditions. And so being able to take these little journeys into those different ideas, those different ways of living, it's just fun. So I was just trying to, and I think she was like, oh, so there's way more to Star Wars than just lightsabers. And yes, it is a full universe. So yeah, I also agree. It was fun. I rarely complain. Like, I'm not one of those internet complainers about things, so I didn't have any issue with it. I just thought it was fun. Like as I was sort of watching through all the episodes back to back, it kind of felt a little bit filler to me. But I think if I was sort of taking my time and watching it through sort of as they posted them, then I probably would just have a little bit more fun with it.
Nice.
Yeah. Also, like the most interesting thing about Christopher Lloyd's character was that you kind of get a little more insight into like the separatist movement and that the people that actually supported it from in the prequels,
and how much they believed in Count Dooku, and how he wasn't just this Jedi that had turned bad, which is that's all we really got from the movies. If you didn't watch Clone Wars or just Clone Wars, I was trying to think. He's not alive in Rebels. No, he's not alive in Rebels. You wouldn't have realized how important he was to certain like planets and all the planets that he had aligned on himself. What was that? Tales of the Jedi, right? That was the animated series.
We actually got like, I think it was 3 episodes with him.
Yeah, because we got one where we had a young Qui-Gon. We had him and Yaddle.
Just a child, when he was training with him.
Yeah. So it was interesting to see how influential Dooku was and how much he felt that the Republic had lost its way, which is a great way for him to become a bad guy. And
the Jedi Council, right?
Yeah. And bad guy, I have to put in air quotes because I don't think he's totally wrong.
No. I know, like after Qui-Gon's death, everything changed for him.
Yeah.
That after Qui-Gon died, he left the Order.
Yeah, there was so much. They were so arrogant, the Jedi, and so sure of themselves, and they didn't realize that they were slowly becoming Palpatine's puppet the whole time. And the fact that Dooku went around to all these planets and were like, you know what, we can do better for you before really sort of getting corrupted. I don't think he understood really what the Emperor's plan was, and I think that's
No. The Emperor always kept everything compartmentalized,
and he was totally surprised when he ended up dying by Anakin's
yes,
hands.
by Anakin's hand.
Oh, I loved it. Anyway, what were we talking about? How did I get to this one?
We were talking about the Mandalorian.
You wanted to ask.
3.
You wanted to ask about Moff Gideon, right?
Yeah, I was just asking which of these characters were from this particular season or from the Mandalorian in general were actually in the Clone Wars or the Rebels.
So Moff Gideon was not in the season. Like, there's a sequence where we see all of these Imperials talking to Moff Gideon about their various projects, right? Moff Gideon has his cloning project, which they don't really know what's going on. They just assume he's taking Beskar armor and sort of helping the Imperials, right?
But even in that discussion, it sounded like he was trying to turn them all against each other.
Yeah, I think he was. Because he wanted resources. They're sort of all vying for that top spot, right? If Palpatine doesn't come back, who gets to be the top dog?
Yeah, and all those warlords, the remnants of the Empire and that, and the Shadow Council, as they called it, they were all still there in support of the return of Grand Admiral Thrawn. Mm-hmm. As most fans in Star Wars know, it was the heir of the Empire.
Yeah, and he also showed up in Rebels, so he was actually very important to the last couple seasons of that show.
He's fascinating, one of the most fascinating of Star Wars villains.
I'm so happy they brought him back.
Someone from an alien race who held a top tier position within the Empire, which was a Terran system.
Yeah, they did not like aliens. That's why we never saw alien species.
Who are we talking about again?
The Empire.
This is Grand Admiral Thrawn.
He's the blue.
Right. He first appeared in Shadows of the Empire, right?
No, that's Caesar.
Okay.
He first appeared in Heir to the Empire, which was a little bit later. Was it a little bit earlier? No, it was a little bit later. Yeah. Mm. So he's a Chiss who originated from the unknown regions of space. So Shells, when you saw Rise of Skywalker, where that planet was and all those Star Destroyers, that was the unknown regions of space. So his species comes from there. Basically, when he came over to the main area of Star Wars, he was here to see how well the core planets were for in terms of war. Like he had to check to see if his species
was under threat from the Empire.
And instead he wanted to just build up in there and destroy everything for fun.
He's fascinating because he's he's a very effective leader in that, and he's also very good at what he does is study alien cultures, right down to the religions and practices and that,
and their art.
And their art and that, and it gives him an insight in that, in how to dominate and defeat these cultures.
So also in that council, we see people that are connecting the original trilogy. We see some people that were at the Death Star there. We see people that are connected to the sequel trilogy. Hux's father was one of the people, and he was part of Project Resurrection.
The mustache guy.
Yeah, that makes even more sense. Also,
I think
Moff Gideon lost his mustache. That's the real that's the real sadness here.
Okay, I got another question for you guys real quick. So
I like these.
It says here that Grand Admiral Thrawn was part of the expanded universe.
Yeah.
And didn't when Disney took over Star Wars, they said they were getting rid of all the expanded universe?
Yeah. So he was part of Heir of the Empire and 2 other books afterwards. Those ended up moving over to Legends. But when Rebels came on, Dave Filoni was like, I really like this character. I'm bringing him into Star Wars canon.
Okay.
So he's officially in Star Wars canon.
And because of his, the connections with Ahsoka and that, he's become kind of vital in moving forward with Disney's plans for what they're doing with the TV series and probably the films going forward.
Yeah, we should do a which episode should people watch for Ahsoka?
Ooh.
Because I think that you don't need to watch all of Rebels. I think there are certain ones you should watch, and there are definitely certain ones in Clone Wars that you need to watch before Ahsoka. I really am interested in how people are going to take that series if they haven't watched anything before.
So, Shouse, you've never watched the episode Twin Sons
From what?
from Rebels?
No.
Oh.
No, I have not. But now I want to.
There are so many good
There's
stories.
some of the finest Star Wars moments come from these series. You know,
I don't think I've ever ugly cried from a cartoon until I saw an episode of Rebels. There's one that's just like, oh, devastating.
Yeah.
Anyway, we find out that what's his name? Moff Gideon is building an army on Mandalore. He's not just bombed the whole place to shit. He has built a refinery to take Beskar and mold armor for his stormtroopers and for himself, and not just regular armor for him. He gets powered armor.
Yeah.
But they also have the jetpacks, and they have all of the Mandalorian weapons too.
Yeah,
they got the flamethrowers, and they have all that stuff too.
So basically, they just took the Mandalorian tech and sort of gave it to stormtroopers without training them to use it like Mandalorian, which is interesting because when the Mandalorians come in, they just sort of wreck the first fleet of stormtroopers.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they get overwhelmed. There's only a certain amount of Mandalorians that came down in the scouting party, and no matter how good you are, if you don't have the numbers, it's just going to be bad news.
Yeah.
And we end up getting our first real death on this series, Paz Vizsla, who was sort of this foil to Din Djarin throughout the whole series, and he ends up being the person that saves all of them. He covers the way as they
because Din Djarin and Bo-Katan save his son from the dragon.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's true. What do you think of this sacrifice?
Because I've since season 1, I've been fascinated with them. You know, it's like when episode 3 and that the Sin, when at the end of it, and that when we see the Mandalorians come together as a cohesive unit defending Din Djarin and that, it was immediately like taken with the guy.
You gotta love the guy with the chain gun.
Because our first run-in with him in that, he was so critical of Din Djarin and that he sits at tables with the Empire. So we always kind of thought, oh, he's just going to be that roughneck who, he's never going to like Din Djarin, But no, they came together. In fact, he becomes that voice, right? When he got up during the thing, he was holding the talking stick. He supported Bo-Katan and Din Djarin's plan,
which we didn't think would happen. Which is awesome.
We thought. Yeah, we thought he was just like a hardcore zealot and that who would just wanted isolationism for him and his son and the people and that. No, he kind of has a change of heart, which is amazing. And the sacrifice, at the end was fantastic because we haven't even really talked about the action in this season and how they've really amped it up, But like that whole scene was fantastic. Him taking on 3 of those Imperial assassins.
The quality of action on all of these live action series. I didn't like Book of Boba Fett, but the action sequences were very good. But I think the best Starfighter battle has been in either Andor or this, and then all the ground battle has been better than most of the movies. I think
big time.
These series, these Disney Plus series, are the best Star Wars that they're making these days.
Yeah,
I'm very glad about Dave Filoni bringing that out. Shows, do you have anything about Paz Vizsla?
Just that I wish I knew more about him. I also wondered if he was a character that had more backstory.
But his family name does have history in the series.
Like his ancestor pre-Vizsla, and that was the leader of Death Watch during the Clone Wars series.
So Bo-Katan knew his father or uncle or something like that. He was older than Bo-Katan.
Yeah.
We have to realize that Bo-Katan was like a teenager or like an early 20-year-old when the Clone Wars were going on. Like that's crazy that she went through that and that through the
But she was a warrior, but she was really young.
Yeah.
Just whenever I see a Mandalorian die, like I want to know what they looked like under their helmet.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that.
You know, like I was like, are we gonna see who this guy? Because we've seen him for so long through the series. Is you know, you just it just got to the point where I'm just like, take off the helmet. I want to see who you are. But I guess that goes against the like, especially against his own creed. That character would not want to have been seen under like even in death. He would want to have his helmet on, right?
Yeah,
that's very interesting. I never even thought about that. That's crazy. And they don't they take armor and then pass it down?
The arm, yeah, like that was what happened with the Boba Fett, right? He got his armor from his father Jango.
Yeah,
it belongs, and I believe Bo-Katan's armor came down to her from her family too.
Interesting. I want to know. Now I want to know more. We do end up getting this massive battle with Bo-Katan and Moff Gideon, and because there's a lot of history there, it was quite intense, this fight, and quite personal. What was interesting was that during this fight, the Darksaber gets broken, and after everything we'd seen in this series, we knew how powerful it was for the people as a symbol. But Bo-Katan's like, you know what? That's just a symbol. We're stronger when we're together. And Din Djarin comes in, and they both kick his ass. With Grogu, let me rephrase. What did you guys think of the defeat? I'm gonna put air quotes of defeat for Moff Gideon, because we didn't see a body, so I don't know if he's actually dead.
Right, no body, no death.
And he's in the armor.
Yeah, he's in the armor. Although a spaceship landed on him, so
yeah,
yeah,
freaking spaceship. I mean, there's got to be a point in which that stuff breaks, right? It was fantastic. The battle scene was great. Like Din Djarin, Bo-Katan, and Grogu, and that functioning as this like amazing fighting unit where they're so much better together than apart. Din Djarin defeated him last season on that using the spear and that. But this just somehow seemed better in that, because also we get to see kind of Grogu coming into fruition. Confident in his Jedi powers, able to contribute. Not just somebody who needs to be protected at all costs and that, but like an effective fighter, and him becoming Din Djarin's apprentice at the end was just the icing on the cake. But it was fantastic, and the breaking of the Darksaber in that, I think that was very symbolic about the series as a whole, in that, and what it was trying to accomplish in that, how like these people and their ideologies and that, it's like kind of needed to.
You Mandalorians are very weak without your trinkets.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, but they're not.
Yeah, they're stronger when they're together.
Yeah,
and they just needed it to bring people together. I think that's.
Like we learned that like in season 2, and that when we saw Din Djarin fighting without his armor and that against a whole cadre of people, and hand to hand, he was like amazing, right? So it's like you can put the armor on the person and that, but like being a Mandalorian was so much more to that. It was it's from childhood up, and that the ways of the warrior. And that's why their civilization was so fractured in that. Like when the pacifist movement came to kind of be the popular consensus among the people on that, Death Watch formed because they wanted the old ways. They wanted the old ways to remain. They didn't want Mandalorians to ever lose that.
It's a good analogy to religion today too. That's very interesting.
But the destruction of the Darksaber, and that was like a great way of saying like some of these beliefs are just they don't really, they're just keeping us divided. So in a way, getting rid of the Darksaber was more poignant. There's a new way. It's like they're not tied to this stupid saber and that to say who can lead us in that.
I think that this reminded me very much of Iron Man 1. Like it felt like the Iron Man 1 fight, because here comes Din Djarin with his armor, but then Gideon has the same armor, but he's the bad guy in the same armor. It's like that fight at the end of Iron Man, and he's about to lose, and then he's it just for me it called back that particular battle.
That's a good reference, actually.
It was neat watching Grogu hopping around using his Force training that he'd gotten from season 2, and that he was able to play a part in that battle, like especially against the three. What are those three soldiers called in red?
They're like Imperial. They're kind of an offshoot of the Imperial Guards that we knew.
They're like the honor guard that would protect the emperor and stuff, right?
They're exactly those.
Yeah.
Right. So it was just neat that when he was, when they were about to do the final blow on Din Djarin, then the Force, he was able to use the Force and stop the attack and everything. Like it was just a cool battle to watch, and seeing him hopping around reminded me of Yoda from Attack of the Clones. Just sort of hopping around, but he didn't have any way to fight with it. He was just avoiding all the attacks. Right.
It's funny because the Force training that he did was Luke was on Book of Boba Fett, so people don't even, if they didn't watch that show, they wouldn't have known that he actually got trained for 2 years. 2 years with Luke. Those are the Red Guards are called Praetorians.
Okay.
I had to go. I was like, Greek, what guards? Greek, were they Roman guards? I can't. Praetorians, that's the one. I loved it. I thought that the smashing of that symbol was very. After watching Clone Wars and the importance of that, and Rebels, where it's even more important, to see that icon just crumble was jarring. But also, it gave so much possibilities for these people. Like, they don't have to follow that for leadership. They need to find a person that can talk to everyone, and they found that in Bo-Katan. I think that's great.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the episode, everything is happy. The Great Forge is relit. They baptize those kids on Mandalore. Din adopts Grogu so that he can have him as his apprentice. We see that Din and Grogu go back to doing bounties again.
They go see Appa.
They go see Appa for the New Republic, which is sort of a callback to the first season. And then we go back to Navarro, where Grief Karga is like, you've done so much for us. We're going to give you some land and a little house that's just outside of the city, so you don't have to chill out over here, because we have our own bodyguard. We have IG-11 again.
Yeah, welcome back.
Just so that, Taika could get a little bit more.
Remember, they were looking for that part from the first episode, and then they find it hanging up in the
bar.
In the bar, the New Republic bar there. Yeah, I'm going to take that.
Yeah. And then we see at the end of the episode, Grogu and Din Djarin just chilling out on his farm, in his homestead. Little circle wipe out. It really felt like the end of the whole series. Like,
there was no after credits scene either.
No, it felt like this was the story of the Mandalorian. He started as this lone person, and now he's here. He's happy. He's the gunslinger that actually came home. My question for you, other than all of that, how would you think? But would you be fine with this being the end of the Mandalorian?
Fine if they concluded at this point. It doesn't always have to be, a Western doesn't always have to end like Shane. Or Shane, come back. Well, he can't come back, even though you see him riding away on the horse, he's actually dead. So if this was the end of it, I would be happy at that, because, it's like, this is our Return of the Jedi ending, right? Where like, everything's, they're celebrating and that, they have new things are happening and that, the old culture of the Mandalore is kind of healed. The Forge is relit, and he gets to go chill with, his apprentice, I mean, like, they spent like the entirety of season 1, being hunted, no safe spots, episode 4 of season 1, and that, that woman talked to Din Djarin about the possibility of them, just settling down and just, not having to leave. It's something he would have enjoyed, especially for Grogu. Now it's something he can actually offer him.
Yeah, and he can still do what he enjoys. He's a bounty hunter by trade, and he can do what he enjoys, but now he's doing it for the cause of good, right? He's working for the New Republic, hunting down Imperials.
Yep.
So he's actually doing good work. It almost feels like nowadays in any kind of literature, any kind of storytelling, we don't get an ending anymore. Everything just sort of, if you can, there's going to be a sequel, there's going to be a prequel, there's going to be many sequels, and things are just going to keep on going. So, and when we get to Picard, the post-credit sequence at the end of Picard season 3 kind of felt a little bit like I didn't really, we'll get to there, but I didn't really like how it kind of spoiled an ending from season 2 a little bit, but I feel like if this was the ending for the Mandalorian story, I think that would be a great place to end it. It doesn't mean that character has to be gone. That character can show up in other opportunities, in other stories that connect. If Boba Fett continues, or if other stories continue, like Ahsoka or anything like that, the character can return. But that arc seems to have a satisfying place to stop.
I agree. Like, we don't have to have the Mandalorian still going out on adventures. Like, I don't need to see that. I'm happy with them being where they are and being sort of happy. Do I want to see him again? Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I would love to see him, and I would love to see more Bo-Katan. I want to know what happens to Mandalore now. I'm more interested in that than seeing him go off and do bounties for fun.
Even if they skipped ahead a little bit too, like if you could see sort of Grogu 10 years later, 20 years later, or something like that.
Agreed.
Like what is that life like with them after Grogu finally maybe is able to speak, or Grogu is able to do more under the sort of mentorship of the Mandalorian?
Well, we know that because of Celebration 2023, Star Wars Celebration, that Dave Filoni's getting his own movie to wrap up all of his storylines. And he has Ahsoka, he has this, he has... I don't know if Skeleton Crew is going to be part of that, or
that feels like something different altogether.
Yeah, but I think mostly the storyline that he started in Rebels is going to conclude around then. And I would love all these people to just come back together to have this giant adventure. I'm sort of sad that it's ending on a movie instead of a giant crossover series, but I'm fine with the movie too, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah, I still don't think it's the end though. And I mean, there was some rumors going around. I think that like even Favreau said in that, I've written season 4 already. It's already filmed. It's already written.
That too. I'm fine with that. Yeah. I didn't even think about a time jump. I would love to see a bigger Grogu, sort of like a bigger Groot. Anyway.
Yeah. Teenage Groot.
Overall, 1 to 10, what would you give this season, Hawk?
Oh, I give it a good 9 as far as like, It was one of the highlights of my week, for 8 weeks in a row.
Damn straight. Shows.
I'm going to go 8.
8?
I'm going to go 8. Yes.
Nice. Good solid season.
Season.
I'm going to also go with 9. I'm a big Rebels and Clone Wars fan, so this brought a lot of stuff in that I was just like, thumbs up. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. All right, welcome back to Geeks with Kids. We are now talking about Picard Season 3, which premiered on February 16th, 2023, and just finished on April 20th, literally a day after Mandalorian. This is the third and final season of Picard, and this year it was showrun by Terry Matalas, who you may know from 12 Monkeys. He also worked on a lot of Season 2, and they liked what his work was, and then they brought him on to finish out this third season. Before we get into the episode review, I want to know what your reaction was, because everyone after Season 2, most people were like, okay, I guess it ended. And then they announced Season 3, and then they're like, you know what? We're bringing back the TNG cast. What'd you guys think?
Well, first up, I had, obviously we've covered this on our other podcast, and that Strange New Pod, and that we covered both seasons of Picard on there, and my reactions were less than favorable. In particular,
I think everyone's reviews were less than favorable.
It just seemed like it started good, had an interesting premise in that, but then seemed to lose track, especially midway and then through into the finales and that, and the finales just felt like rushing past, that, what do they call it? Not a victory lap, but
past the post?
They just, it just like, they just wanted to get to the end as fast as they could. Season 3 was way different. It felt like a 10-hour movie, as we've said.
We'll get to that. Don't worry.
Yeah. And it did everything right and left me feeling, the same way I did when I was 12 years old watching TNG for the first time.
Shaz, what did you think of when they announced the TNG cast?
Okay, I was so excited. Like the initial announcement that they were going to do it, and then when we started getting the little teasers, we started hearing just their voices, and then we started seeing just like screenshots, like we got the faces, like the Worf with his older face and everything.
Oh yeah.
And then what they did with Brent Spiner's with the big reveal, making you believe that we're going straight lore, and the hype was there. I was so excited for this show, and just like Hawk said, it delivered. It so delivered.
Yes. That was what I said when I heard that the TNG cast was coming back. I was like, this is what I want. This is what I've wanted since the first time they announced Picard. I am not a fan of season 1 or 2 at all. I'm not going to watch them again. I don't need to. After watching this season,
I didn't buy either of the Blu-rays for either of those sets.
That's a big thing,
because I know you buy 3.
Because I know you, and I know you love Star Trek so much. So the fact that you didn't buy that says a lot. That says a lot.
I have a lot of Blu-rays and DVDs of Star Trek.
Yeah, and you keep on buying them because they keep on putting out new formats. So we get
like
this. No, go for it.
I say, like, what they did well was they did expand the universe, in certain ways. We are introduced to in some very interesting aspects in that, the Quat Malat, the XBs, and the project, recovering people who have been captured by the Borg.
I think the issue with the first 2 seasons is that it happened, but there are no ramifications from it, right?
Mm-hmm. No, it's almost like the whole thing was retconned.
Or just self-contained. Like they mentioned the Jurati Borg, but they're just guarding.
They're there, but they're not important.
They're guarding that portal thing. That's all they do. They don't do anything else. They just guard. Let's not talk about them anymore. They're fine. So this season starts off with a mystery, and really that's what the first third of the show is. It's a mystery because we find out that Beverly has sent Picard a SOS signal
on an old communicator,
on an old TNG era comm badge, which I should have brought out and popped on the screen. And Picard, he hears this message. He knows that Beverly hasn't talked to him in 20-ish years. So he's intrigued, but he doesn't understand what this message is. So he goes to the one person that everyone would go to. At least this is the person I would go to, and that's Commander Will Riker. And he finds out that because of the Locutus incident, they have this means of communicating in code, so that they could send things out in distress, and they get this coordinates, but they can't get anywhere because they're retired. So what's their plan? Let's commandeer a vehicle. Let's commandeer the Titan. Why? Because we know someone on board. We know Commander 7 of 9, who now is called Commander Hansen because of a certain Captain Shaw.
Mm-hmm.
And they end up going to this section of space, commandeering the spaceship without Shaw's knowledge, and we find out that Beverly has a son. And that's the mystery that's the first episode of Picard. What do you think of this start off? I know I said I was going to break this down in thirds, but the first episode really captures the spirit of the whole season.
Yeah, it was great in laying down the foundation of what the series and the plot of the series would build on. Picard answering that distress call, and that taking it to Will because he can't decipher it, and finding out that the reason he can't decipher it was because this is something that happened while he was still Locutus, and that Hellbird. What does this mean? It turned out it was a virus that the Borg had infected the Enterprise with, and that started inserting random digits onto the end of computer code, and that to try and disrupt their systems. So, with that in mind, they get the coordinates. I love the way it built it. Seeing Riker and Picard at where their stations were at, and how in Starfleet at that particular time. Also introduced us to one of the most memorable characters I think we've been introduced to in a long time, and Captain Liam Shaw, and that played by the incomparable Todd Stashwick, who made one hell of a first impression in that episode. Did he not?
He did, and now he has a second no meme based on him. Yeah. Any more, or should we talk to shows?
I think talk to shows.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So right away with the nostalgia, the picture of the Enterprise that they were in, Chateau Picard. They were taking down the picture of the Enterprise, and he said, send that to Geordi at the Fleet Museum.
Commodore Geordi too.
Commodore
You're like,
yeah,
wow,
right?
he's gone up in ranks.
So they're just starting to throw stuff at us right from the beginning. But the cool part about it was they started throwing things at the beginning, knowing that people were going to be picking the episode apart piece by piece.
Mm-hmm.
And so right away, shows like Screen Crush that could go through frame by frame, scene by scene, and help you see things that you might have missed the first time. Just
because they have a whole writing staff.
Yeah, right.
I thought this episode was amazing. I know that Star Trek shows have really have a good way of starting off. So I was like, okay, I know I'm gonna get hooked after the first episode anyway. But this was the first time I actually felt like I was watching a Star Trek show. There's air quotes there, because this felt like it was right in line with TNG season 7.
Yeah.
Right? It felt like if they had a season or a card that right before that said, you know what, this happens just 25 years later. I'd be like, okay, yeah, I believe that this is by the same writing crew, the same people who shot things. They were doing shots that looked exactly the same as TNG shots. Like, that's amazing.
But they also included the Raffi stuff in this episode too.
Yeah.
Like the getting the whole underworld, the criminal underworld. You had to sort of get her role set up for this season.
We'll talk about her storyline in a separate section, because I think really this first half about him finding Jack is really the main thing. I think Raffi and Worf, as much as I love their storyline, isn't really important until they hook up with Picard and crew. Unfortunately,
it almost felt like the portal device, as cool as it was just kind of a plot device for a couple of episodes.
Let's just go into that now, because
it was literally a red herring in both the terms of what the changelings were.
It's spoiling. We're spoiling anyway.
Okay, yeah, spoiling it. And what the changelings used it for as a distraction, and what it was, the way it was a red herring for us, and that kind of, it's like, ooh, is this the big threat that's coming? Because they just destroyed the whole Starfleet cadet training building, and that was it.
So basically what we found out at the beginning is, and really this is the first, I want to say 4 or 5 episodes with Raffi, is that she's sort of on this manhunt because she knows that weapons of mass destruction have gone missing, and so she's following the clues. She's working for Starfleet intelligence, which is a great evolution of her character based on what we've seen in the last 2 seasons of Picard.
And her and Seven are not together anymore.
Yeah, see, so nothing really is important from the first 2 seasons, because you don't need to know anything about that. So she is on this hunt, and she has this mysterious handler, which we find out later is Worf. But as she continues down the trail, she finds out that this portal weapon that was really just used to do this distraction, and then I guess to give it to Vadic's ship as well, or they have a separate one. I think it's the same portal weapon. Anyway, all of that was just a distraction for what we find out later had happened at the Daystrom Institute. What do you think of their storyline before they meet up with Picard and crew?
Into it, I love this storyline, and that Raffi for the first 2 seasons was an interesting character, but they did tend to sideline her a bit in that with everything else that was going on.
She had her alcoholism, and she had her drug problems, and
which is kind of new territory in that for Star Trek characters, because we always think of these perfect, captains and commanders, and that
they sort of play on that in the first episode too, because she's undercover with drug dealers, but we don't know that she's undercover. She's just using. Yeah.
But she it's an area that of the universe Starfleet can't enter, the criminal underworld, and which made her kind of perfect for it, because spycraft was her main forte, and that she worked the Romulan desk for years for Starfleet. She was the one who figured it out, the whole thing with Utopia, Planitia, and that it was the Romulans, but nobody would listen to her. But this seemed like the kind of avenue in that she could be best utilized in, going undercover. She had the pedigree for it, obviously, with her addiction issues and that. And, so they took the elements of the character that that have been thrown at them for season 1 and 2, and found a great way of using it. And as you said, like the mysterious handler being Worf, and that it's revealed, it's dramatically revealed that he is her handler.
Yeah.
Because she gets into some very serious trouble on that with a particularly nasty Ferengi.
Yeah, and she sort of seems like a younger Worf, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was
like a Worf apprentice.
Yeah, well, that's what she ends up becoming. But he's at this Jedi master level of calm, whereas I remember him being a little bit more hot-headed when he was on TNG, and that's sort of where Raffi is to an nth degree. Shouse, what did you think of this her journey to meeting Worf? And
it was just neat to see the underworld stuff was really cool. The crime boss Vulcan was really neat. I really enjoyed watching him. How logical it is to be involved with organized crime and everything like that. It was cool seeing that they were building a bunch of stories that all connected together at the end, but. I think that the portal device was kind of a wasted opportunity a little bit. I really enjoyed how it was used in the space combat.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, this is going to change everything. And then they're like, let's just jettison it and forget about it.
We'll talk about Vadic in a little bit. I agree. I liked the pairing of Worf and Raffi. I think that was a great way to have them they were yin and yanging the whole way through, and I love that. I loved it so much. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the galaxy, we get Picard and company finding Beverly's ship, and there's another boy on there. There's someone on there with Beverly. It's Beverly's son. What? A 20-ish year old son?
Wesley Crusher.
Not Wesley.
Nope.
Wesley, no. Wesley's off. He can't talk to anyone. I don't know if you saw. They did an interview with him, and they're like, "Why didn't Wesley show up in season 3?" He's like, as a traveler, when you accept becoming a traveler, you have to realize that they have to give away. They have to not touch their previous life, because if they do go towards it, they may try and influence that, and that's not what the travelers do. They work on giant.
They're focused on the tapestry, not the seams.
Yeah, exactly. And they can't be distracted by the family, which is sad, but I understand. So we find out that Jack is Picard's son.
Which they really didn't try to hide too much.
They did not.
I mean, and it was very obvious. Even Riker was like, really?
Riker right away. He was like, come on, man. We know what you guys did 20-ish years ago. What'd you guys think about Jack being revealed as Picard's son?
I really love the character of Jack Crusher, and the actor who played him, Ed Spieler. He did a great job. He reminded me of like what Picard would have been like, probably if he didn't get that Nausicaan blade through the chest.
Yes, you're right. I didn't even think about that.
It's like all the charm and the roguishness and that, which apparently Picard was famed for in the Academy, and that, and only he's out with his mother in the galaxy and that, and like he's not being a rascal thief or anything like that. He's actually helping people.
He's very smart.
You get to see a little bit of it though when he's dealing with the Fenris Rangers.
Yeah,
and you can tell he's very street smart.
Yeah,
like he knows how to talk to people. He knows how to influence people. He knows how to get himself out of a jam. Right?
He's Han Solo in Star Wars or in Star Trek.
Yeah. It was a great introduction to a character in that, and one of the parts of Picard's life that had always seemed like an afterthought. I know they talked about it like a lot, in season 2 and that, about why he never got married, and felt like always pushing people away and that, and but this was the missing piece in Picard's tapestry.
Yeah.
Reference. Yeah.
Yeah, and his tapestry hasn't burned up like his previous family. Sorry.
Ouch.
I know, right? Too soon.
Shows, what do you think of Ed Spieler's as
he was awesome.
Yeah.
He was awesome. He was charming. He was funny. He was interesting to watch. Anytime he showed up on screen, it was cool. We'll get into probably more about how he interacted with some of the other characters on the Titan and stuff later, but
we'll see.
he was just that suave kind of like the Han Solo. He was cool.
He's probably one of my favorite additions to Star Trek in a long time. Like he was,
and if things continue, which we all hope will, then
Star Trek Legacy.
Hashtag Star Trek Legacy. Then maybe we'll get to see more of him.
Yeah, damn straight. We find out that Jack has been hunted, or at least has been recently being hunted by this amazing character called Vadic, played by Amanda Plummer, who is already Star Trek royalty because she's the daughter of Christopher Plummer, who was in Star Trek 6. And she really channeled her dad this whole season.
She was so good.
And for what seemed like episodes, the Titan was just running from Vadic, and she was relentless. What do you think of this unknown? We didn't really find out what she was for quite a few episodes. What do you think of Vadic as a bad guy? And then you know what? I'm just gonna continue on. We find out she's a changeling, and that changelings are the bad guys of this season.
Yeah.
Hawk.
Great character, great enemy, and she just played it with all, that menacing joy, that she's kind of famed for in her movies, because as soon as she was announced as a villain, I know like all the Honey Bunny memes from Pulp Fiction started to really come out. It's like,
oh, Honey Bunny.
But this is what she does. She plays really good villains. Like I said, joyful to in a certain way, and that she really had Picard's number and the Titans crew and throughout the entire episode of in the Nebulous.
When they were hunting the Titan and kept on doing the portal gun, she had so much fun. Like the joy on Vadic, not just Amanda Plummer, but Vadic's face that she was screwing with them the whole time.
Yeah, man. And then finding out her backstory and like why it wasn't so much she was like just blowing them out of the water, and that she wanted to hurt them and peck at them, as she said, like a Shrike, which her ship was named after. And we find out her backstory as a changeling captured by Section 31 and experimented on,
tortured.
A great little reference actually to DS9, and that there was that episode with regarding when Odo reconnected with the man who found him as a gelatinous blob, and applied a lot of the same kind of techniques to him to get him to just even react. But finding out that Section 31 was trying to weaponize the changelings into perfect Starfleet spies and infiltrators.
Brutal.
Yeah, kind of gets you a little excited for whatever the Section 31 movie is going to look like.
Oh my god!
Right when that comes out. But I got to tell you guys, I was spoiled a little bit in this first, was it the first or the second episode, because I like to watch with subtitles on, and I was watching it on TV, the broadcast on TV, and it popped up when the when Vadic was talking to her minions on the ship, and the minions were responding, so it popped up and it said changeling. Colon garbled language.
They did that on Crave.
And it's like,
did they?
Yeah. And it's like, you're gonna changeling. Like they had said that before. Like, so that was a spoil for anybody who was watching it with subtitles. And so that certainly wasn't caught. But I mean, I wasn't any less excited about it. But then I started going into all of these weird theories that were popping up on the internet about who were the changelings, and if they were the big bad of the episode, which of the TNG crew were actually changelings and trying to infiltrate Picard's ship and all this stuff. Like it really went on this weird kind of rabbit hole. But going back to sort of Amanda Plummer and her portrayal of Vadic, like it was a masterpiece. It was just so good. And later on in the series or in the show, we get to see when she's on board the Titan, and she's she's the captain of the Titan, and she's really torturing the Titan's crew and terrifying them, and like it's just she was so unsettling in such an excellent way.
I mean, it makes sense that she was doing that to them. Like, I never thought that I would feel like empathy for her. Like, we heard her story about how she was tortured, and who wouldn't get radicalized after that, right? Like
she just hated all solids.
They made their enemy by doing that. Like, it's their fault. And I don't think the Borg and the changelings would have gotten together if there wasn't this sect of changelings that were just like, we need any means possible to get back at what these humans have done to us, or these solids have done to us. Like,
Yeah.
that's fascinating. That's like
Yeah, because with the changelings, what we knew of them, like from DS9 and that, they were like this, for the most part, they were content with pacifism and that, but it was other worlds and that were kind of trying to invade in their territory that caused them to become warlike and have that stance,
Yeah.
When she started killing her own people, I was thinking changelings aren't allowed to kill other changelings, and that's a big rule.
Yeah.
They took away Odo's shapeshifting powers because of that.
Yeah. No.
But then you realize these are zealots. This is an entire sect, and that,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's all these things they sacrifice lifespans and that in order to appropriate these new evolutionary traits and that, and being able to take a form and replicate it perfectly, and even fool the censors and all the tests that they had come up with, during the Dominion War. And how it was Odo who was the one who informed Worf that there was a new sect of these zealots and that who were trying to hurt Starfleet.
It's astounding how amazing the changeling plot was, and the fact that we found out that the changeling showed up purely because of the transporter chief, and the importance of that later on.
Yeah,
it was such a brilliant means of bringing in this character that I never thought, or this species that I never thought was gonna ever come back ever.
And they came back evolved. They came back new. Right? They were undetectable, and didn't they have this ability to change other changelings to have that same ability?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that how she described it?
She was one. She escaped from the lab. I know that there was probably
Her
a
and
couple
Nine.
others. Her and Nine,
Yeah.
and that, but others they've found other changelings that unchanged the way they were, who were still angry about the way what had happened to them with the Dominion War, and that they made a compact with them, and that it's like, we can give you these abilities that'll allow you to defeat your enemy, and that it's going to shorten your lifespan. You won't be who you were before, and that, but we will have our revenge.
And that's a radicalization that can only happen after someone else has done something terrible.
Mhm.
Right. So they're hunting Jack, and we don't know why. But it's relentless. There's a point in the series where the Titan is adrift and just going to die in this nebula. And we see that Vadic is talking to this random head, and it tells her that she has to get Jack by any means possible. So there's sort of this importance to Jack that we don't quite understand. But as the series unfolds, we see that Jack's getting these visions, and that he sort of has these powers that he can control people, or he can read the minds of people. It starts happening with Sidney LaForge. We find out that the helmsman of the Titan A is one of the daughters of Geordie LaForge. Amazing. But she has this connection with Jack, not just because he can read her mind, but because he can also swoon the ladies.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a romantic connection there. Yeah.
What do you guys think about this? All of a sudden, Jack having these visions and these powers, which were actually quite instrumental to the end of Vadic. Vadic dies. We know.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
What do you think about this, and about Vadic's death? Because I think it was an amazing death.
I mean, that was the biggest mystery of the series, and that through right up until episode 9, is like, what was Jack? Because he wasn't. We had heard that we found out that he had Irumodic syndrome, which was passed down to him from Picard.
Mm-hmm.
But not in this way, and that nothing about Irumodic syndrome was gives you telepathic abilities, and that obviously with Picard. It caused, in all good things, we know it caused irrational emotions, hallucinations. It was very frightening, and it's a very terrible way to die. Now we found out that Jack apparently has it, but as we learn, they've misdiagnosed it. They base it all on symptoms and that, and misdiagnosed the actual cause. The Irmotic syndrome was not the Irmotic syndrome. But like I said, it was the biggest mystery in that because Jack was, experiencing hallucinations about these tendrils that were just growing up everywhere into people, into structures everywhere. And then on top of that, a red door that he had always been afraid his entire life to open.
And we get to talk about that at the end of this episode. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Shows. What do you think about Superpower Jack?
It was okay. So we're also.
And the end of Vadic. What did you think of that?
And the end. Do you want to say that, Hawk? What you thought about Vadic dying?
It was a good death, I think.
It was a good day for her to die.
It was one of the most tense episodes. And her taking the whole bridge crew hostage and that to force Jack to come to her, and like the whole thing about randomly going around and that and picking which person was going to die and that, one person an hour until you decide to finally do it and just toying with the crew. And then the randomness and taking out Tavine, which we were all starting to really like Tavine as a character. Yeah,
I have issues with she took two Asian characters and was like, I was like, these are the only two Asian people in this show. Please don't kill one of them. And then I was like, oh, but you killed Tavine.
Yeah.
Oh man, there was no good there. Sorry, shows. Anyway, it was a good death, is what you're saying.
It was a good death.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
We've been getting some interesting references, I find, in this Star Trek series, specifically things that you don't see in a lot of other series, like swearing, for example, which I was for, because I don't think that cursing is something that would have necessarily vanished in the future.
I agree.
Right. So when she was like, effing solids or whatever, as she
you can swear on this show. It's okay.
We got the little explicit thing.
We've always had an explicit.
Nice.
Thing.
Okay. Yeah. So she goes like fucking solids, and then she gets sucked out. It's like awesome. It's they even make references earlier in the series to like marijuana and stuff like that they never really talked about in Star Trek. Right. So it was kind of an interesting thing there with like, it was kind of a funny but also awesome kind of death. She sort of flies through space and then hits hits her ship and explodes into tiny pieces.
Yes.
Right. So it was a really cool way for her to die. But we knew that she was like, as powerful as she was scared of that floating head that was telling her what to do. And there's even a point where that head was torturing her.
Yeah.
And so there was another big bad that was being kind of hinted at before we were aware of where that was going. But it's neat that all connects with Jack's superpowers, and there was a lot of talk about the Paul Wraiths being what was going on. That if we're talking about changelings, then we're digging into the Deep Space Nine repertoire a little bit, and he's got the red glowing eyes. Are we dealing with a possessed? Like when Gul Dukat was possessed by the Paul Wraith, right?
Or Jake Sisko.
Yeah. So it was an interesting kind of diversion. But it was cool as he was discovering them, like a superhero origin story. He was discovering them as he was going.
It's funny because I jumped way ahead and I didn't mean to, because there was a lot that happened before Vadic died. Because we had found out that the changelings had come and infiltrated this ship, but really we didn't know that how deep that went until we saw the return of Rolaren, who we'd last seen on TNG years ago. And the last time we saw her, she had a phaser on Will Riker and just like effed off to become part of the Maquis. Here, it's hard to put to words how important she was to this series, even though it was just a brief appearance because she unfortunately dies. But before that, she comes to terms with Picard, and Picard comes to terms with her about how the relationship had evolved and sort of dissolved over the course of TNG. And she really was that daughter figure to him, unfortunately. And she was more important here because she was not the head of Central or Starfleet Intelligence, but she was one of the people of Starfleet Intelligence that was working with Worf and Raffi to uncover this plot. And she was the one that found out that Starfleet, from the highest ranks down to the lowest, lower decks, there have been changelings on all of these ships. What do you think of the return of Ro Laren?
Like, it couldn't be stressed enough how important it was, like, her character, for someone who was brought in like midway through the series. She challenged Picard in a lot of ways in that, and it kind of brought up like a lot of great points about the kind of bureaucracy and the way Starfleet would have favored peace over human rights. They kept their peace accord with the Cardassians, and that while Bajorans were suffering under under Cardassian rule. And she challenged Picard in that, and she brought out like I think kind of reminded him in that of these things that he was willing to kind of whatever
sacrifice,
but
for
exactly.
the greater good, I guess.
The greater good. And she was in the second, I think it was the second last episode in that, Before All Good Things.
Second
was her final appearance.
Something like that.
She was an important part of the series in that, even in the small number of episodes that she did appear in. Her appearance was just like, it was shocking to me. I had no idea she had returned for the role. Michelle Forbes, she had kind of moved on. It's like, I think she kind of realized early on that Star Trek was a great thing, but it could also be a curse if you're a working actor in that. Because it's like it tended to typecast you into a certain role. As
and
we
then
know,
she jumped on the Battlestar.
Because Battlestar fucking ruled, and she knew that.
It's true.
But like she was offered, what was it? She was offered like Deep Space Nine, right?
Yeah.
That in the role that Nana Visitor would later, make into Kira.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like her return was just shocking, unbelievable, and to say the least. And the fact that it was like one of the most heartbreaking episodes of the season, where she her and Picard trying to suss each other out, trying to figure out if they were who they were actually say they were. Because at this point Picard knew that changelings were afoot.
Yeah.
And that Ro showing up out of the blue and being in Starfleet at all without his knowledge.
Yeah.
You
broke my heart. You broke mine. Oh, that kills me.
I know.
I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that.
But
scene.
It was a great appearance. I know people were upset and sad that she died and that, but like she did what she wanted to do with that character. Coming back for that one last ride.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, to sort of close, like this series was a lot of this season was about closing off loose threads.
Mm-hmm.
Properly closing off loose threads in the Next Generation, and they did a great job with some of the bigger ones, and this is an example of a smaller one that they did a good job on, just making sure that some of these characters get a proper send off. Now she was sort of killed off, but she also was able to have that connection with Picard before it happened that needed to happen, I think. So it was also super exciting to see her appear.
Yeah. So on a side note, Terry Metalis had said in a recent interview that they wanted to do a lot of things in the later episodes, but ran out of budget and time. And one of them was to see Ro Laren and Tuvok in a changeling jail. So she had actually survived the shuttlecraft explosion. So take that as you will. I like her sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a fitting end to her character and her story arc. So, but I'm not going to be sad if I see her again. Let's be honest about that. I like that she was the one that ended up bringing Worf and Raffi back to Picard, because they had been separated for so long, and we had heard that the TNG cast was getting back together, but they had all been separated so far. So Worf and Raffi end up joining the crew and continuing their mission on finding out about the changeling threat. This is all before Vadic died. I jumped ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But because of this giant threat and the fact that the changelings know that the Titan and crew know what's going on, they're getting hunted. So they go and hide amongst the Starfleet Museum, and we get to see Commodore LaForge, and he gets to come on board, have words with his daughter. You know, they have a little bit of strife, but things happen. They take what's it called, a cloak from an old ship, and we get to have Geordi join the crew, and I'm trying to just piece together all the happiness I have, because from this point forward, we start getting more and more TNG casts. We find out that they need to go to Daystrom because there had been a break-in, but there was a security system that was in the way. We find out that security system was Data, and they end up taking Data and bringing him back to the ship. And there's this beautiful scene where this new android, who is going to be another Sung, ended up putting in Data's half and Lore's half, as well as some other bits and pieces of the other androids in there. But the main two personalities were Lore and Data, because they were the yin and the yang. A lot of yin and yang this season, right?
Yeah.
And they end up becoming integrated into one being. And I have a hard time saying it's Data because he's more than Data. What do you think of Brent Spiner, his multitude of parts in this season, and how he sort of built this Data that's more human than human?
I couldn't, I knew I get, as we mentioned in that with the trailers and that, we thought it was just going to be, Lore and maybe a conclusion to Lore as a storyline in the series and that. But then again, it's like, why is he so old in the trailers? I like this a lot better. I didn't even know I wanted Data back this badly after, season 1 kind of seemed to conclude his storyline more properly than Nemesis did, with giving Data an actual death that he could experience, something he actually wanted to experience.
Yeah, that was the best part of season 1, was his death.
It was. And the fact that, they've managed to figure out a way to bring Data back into the series, and, they did a good job.
It felt like him.
And they made him human. What he always wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Gollum body that, was given to Picard, was, they had created one for, Sung had created one for Data and that, but unfortunately he had died before he had really finished the work. He took all the, not just Data, not just Lore, but also B4, Lal, and even components of his own personality, and put them all into this new being, and that, which was kind of like the big leap forward, for AI and organics. And then we had this amazing story about the fight for control between Data and Lore. And Brett Spiner, with just a simple nod, a simple turn of his head, and that he switches characters. It's like it's something only he was capable of doing.
Yeah, we had his Gollum and Schmeagol moment, and it was beautiful.
Yeah, it was beautiful. It's a storyline I didn't know I wanted until we got it.
There was this amazing sequence between Geordi and Data, where Geordi was finally able to express to Data how he felt when Data died, because those two were best friends, and you know that there was a lot about how Picard took the death, but you never got to see how Geordi took the death.
Exactly. That was the biggest issue I had with season 1, was that Geordi wasn't there to be part of Data's journey. Oh man.
Yeah. And so he was able, Geordi had his own little journey there too. Even the first time we saw him, he kept saying no to Picard. I can't help you. I have to take care of my daughters. They're more important than saving the universe. He had completely different priorities than he would have had in TNG, right? And then he sort of had to go through that change to figure out that if he didn't do something, he wasn't going to be able to protect his daughters.
Well, I feel like that's in part because of the death of Data. He couldn't protect them, so he had to protect all his loved ones from that point forward. I feel like that was his turning point.
So when Data was able to come back and he was able to finally make that reconnection with Data, it's like we got the old LaForge back. But yeah, I agree with Hawk completely. Data was incredible. Bringing that character back was amazing. It was the only way that you could actually have an older Brent Spiner playing Data and it make any sense, because they tried to do it in season 1 and it still looked awkward. Right? Put him in the makeup, and it's like, yeah, that's not
The face got a little kind of bigger over the years.
Yeah, right. And so they found a way to do it, and it was a really clever way to do it, and it fit into the canon, it fit into the storyline, and he was just it was just so cool watching those different characters sort of come out of Brent Spiner and all of the references, like here's Spot, and here's my hologram of Tasha Yar, all of that stuff, right? Which she actually said on Twitter she was happy that she appeared as a little tribute in the show too, because
they couldn't bring her back.
They couldn't bring her back, but Terry Metalis retweeted that or made some kind of comment about it too, about her being on there, which was really cool. But yeah, Data being back, LaForge being back, huge.
Yeah, and then we also have Troy coming back because through a series of events, Vadic's people had taken her a hold, but because Vadic is dead, she's back on the crew with everyone else. And there's only one person that could help Jack see through that red door, and that's Troy. So she does her thing. She helps him out. But does she really help him out? Because as she goes through the door, she opens it and finds out that the Borg were there all along. The voices that have been talking to Jack the whole time was that of the Borg Queen. Now, this was a turn I did not expect. This was unexpected.
And it was voiced by Alice
Krige,
right?
Yeah. So the real threat were not necessarily the changelings. It was the Borg who were working with the changelings to enact their plan. What was that plan? Assimilate all of Starfleet. At least people that were under 25. What they ended up doing was they ended up stealing Picard's body, the one that had died in season 1. And like Hawk was saying, they took part of the brain, which they thought was Irumodic syndrome, but it was actually Borg technology. And they implemented that.
It seems like a biotechnology, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they implemented that into the transporter architecture on all the ships in Starfleet. So whenever someone transported, this little piece of code became part of them in their frontal lobe. But because the frontal lobe stops developing after 25, it only affected 25-year-old
and younger
that were in the fleet.
I didn't realize it's a very clever way to make the old people save the day.
Exactly.
I know.
What did we think of this plot that the Queen had devised?
Before I answer, I just have to let my dog out for a quick pee.
I'm gonna let Shouse answer then.
Okay.
What was the question again?
The plot to assimilate Starfleet. What was it? What did you think of the transporter plot?
So that was another one of those brilliant like Star Trek moments, right? Yeah. Where you had it being explained by LaForge and Data.
The perfect.
And they were pointing at stuff on computer screens,
using big words.
Yeah, they were walking the crew through the implications of everything. This is a classic TNG episode, right? This is what we were used to seeing week in and week out when, whatever the problem was that had to be solved by the next gen crew, there was usually some kind of technical or diplomatic solution to it. And it came from the crew working together and figuring things out and watching them describe what happened and watching Geordi realize that they had been assimilated. They were assimilating everyone right under their noses the whole time.
Yeah. I also love that whenever they did something that was medical, it was always Beverly and those two together. So the fact that they had all three of them being like, wait a minute, this is working off this. So you get the engineering, like masterminds working together. And then the medical one that's right beside them being like, wait a minute, what if they do this and this? And they were all working out this problem together. Beverly Crusher didn't get much to do in those last couple films. So the fact that she was working with Geordi and Data to figure out what the transporters were doing to everyone, I thought that was brilliant. Gates McFadden
Crusher became so badass in this season.
yeah. But I thought it was an amazing way to take over ships. Hawk, what did you think of the transporter plot?
The transporter plot was great. First up, like I was the one kind of saying all season long it can't be the Borg. Everybody was saying it's got to be the Borg.
I didn't want it to be the Borg because we had done the Borg so many times.
Right, but then when you look back,
resistance is futile.
It's like Season 1, it was the Borg weren't really the villain in that they were like a part of the plot, with the XBs and that, and a way of reintroducing Seven to us and that. Season 2, the Borg Queen was, very much the plot, but turned out, as kind of a central villain, was kind of co-opted by Girardi and turned into something else, turned into the Build Back Better Borg, as we keep calling them. So the fact that they brought the Borg back, I was hesitant at first when I saw them and that, but at the same time, once I saw the ship behind the door, I was there. I was intrigued.
Yep.
I was like, oh my God, it is true. Jed, something about his DNA is the Borg. And it makes sense because, it's like going back to the old stories in Voyager and that, the Borg were always looking for perfection and that. There was that one episode, what they call it, the Omega Directive?
Unimatrix Zero?
No. It was totally separate one. It was about this particular molecule and that the Borg.
Oh yeah, the one
was.
Yeah, that one was the one that could destroy warp travel, right?
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember.
Because all of the Starfleet captains knew it if they ever came across that molecule.
Yeah. But it reminded me that the Borg, were always fascinated by perfection and that, and they never stopped in that. And, Flesh and Blood, it was like, the last great barrier to them, right? Because, as much as they were an organic culture and that, they were largely machine culture, So, and they could assimilate, but they could not reproduce.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Borg babies.
So this, so in a way, when I viewed it, I was like, this is the final victory of the Borg. Yeah. Right, to introduce their own DNA and that could be easily incorporated into every civilization's DNA,
Yeah.
so that everybody would eventually be Borg and breed Borg.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. Like it's such an ingenious way. Terry Matalas hat tip. And the fact that Starfleet, for some odd reason, keeps going back to automation. They keep on doing
it's
this.
Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plots about automation, I think.
In the past couple years, it's just like we don't want to have us doing all of this crap all the time. Let's make sure there's a way that our ships can just do it by themselves. Because it was on Prodigy, lower decks.
Our fingers get tired. What do you want from us?
There's too much touching. The screens are too smooth. So they ended up taking over the fleet. Unfortunately to the detriment of Admiral Shelby. The under 25s.
She takes 2 in the chest.
She takes 2 in the chest.
Rest in peace, Shelby.
That was an unfortunate cameo. So they end up taking over the fleet, which is already trying to be automated, and the Titan crew, or at least not the Titan crew, the elders of the Titan crew end up having a last stand on the lower decks of the Titan, and Captain Shaw dies while having the rest of the Enterprise D crew just shuttle off somewhere else. What'd you think at the end of Shaw?
I know. I hated him in the first episode so much. It was like the casual way he dismissed Riker and that. It's like, you're into that jazz and that. And he's like, all the bebop and chaos and that. He's like, I like meter and structure.
I like polkas and waltzes.
Insulting them at every step of the way in that dinner and that, but like episode by episode, it's like he started to win you over because you realize he's not just some asshole and that he's actually very smart. He helped. It's like, how do they keep finding us? As he's there with the sucking chest wound, he's like, how did they keep finding us? Which leads Jack to go from that to this, and then helping Seven and that figure out how to find a changeling.
Yeah.
There was dimensions to him, and then obviously, like when you learned that he was a survivor of Wolf 359.
Yeah.
I thought they were really building him to maybe herald a new series, as Captain of the Titan, but unfortunately, no. He has to make a sacrifice play in that in order for them to defeat the Changelings and the Borg. And this was a good death. Another good death in this series.
It's a good day to die.
Yeah.
Shows thoughts?
Yeah, same thing. I love the character. I thought he was fabulous. He was sarcastic, and that's my kind of humor too. So, when when they would go, Captain Shaw, we have to go. We have to go. To the back to Earth, and he'd be like, "Of course we do," like that kind of stuff. Like he would just the sarcastic comments and everything. Love the character.
Does anybody want to throw any more weird shit at me today?
Yes, that's my favorite line. Or when he's all like happy in the turbo lift when he thinks the other two are going to get in trouble. And,
I decided to radio ahead.
Yeah. Can you get your bullshit story together?
It's so cool because these characters, Riker and Picard and all them, have always had this reverence to them, and to have somebody basically say, I don't care how important you think you were,
Yeah. This is my ship, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Raffi and Seven are left on to save the Titan, while the rest of the D crew go back to the Starfleet Museum, and we see that Geordi has been the ultimate nerdy car guy, and refixed up the Enterprise D, which had crash landed back in Generations.
Which you could argue is also a main character of the Next Generation.
100%.
Yes.
I fully expected that ship to saucer separate in the final episode, which it didn't, unfortunately. So they take the D and they go and off to Jupiter and find this giant Borg cube, and inside, we get another away team. We get Worf, Riker, and Picard going down and confronting the Queen, because Jack is down there, having become the voice of the Borg. I skipped over a lot, but I wanted to move faster, more intense.
Because it's almost midnight.
Yes, exactly. So Picard ends up talking to Jack and getting him to disconnect from the collective through fatherly love. And there's this amazing sequence where
the power of love.
The power of love. Huey Lewis had it right, man. What did we think of this whole rescue scene that we see all the Enterprise shooting shit up, Beverly Crusher being a badass? There's a Death Star trench run, Death Star 2
the
trench
Enterprise
run.
D has never looked as cool.
Yeah, I just want you guys to talk about how cool the sequence is and how awesome the power of love is. Go, both of you. Hawk, go first.
All right. In the series that gave me things that I didn't even know I wanted or needed, and that they gave me back the Enterprise D.
Yep.
I didn't know. I did not know.
I did not either. I did not have an inkling.
I thought it would be coming back.
The Enterprise D is currently the wallpaper on my computer right now.
Damn straight.
I just felt my throat tighten when I saw it. It was like, oh my god, they're gonna be and it was made perfect sense as to why it was there.
Yeah.
And why they needed it at that.
Not connected
why
to
it
the
would
fleet.
work.
Yeah, not connected to the fleet, old school and that, and it's their ship and that. It's like, it's
just
how
like the
they saved
Battlestar.
it's how they saved the universe like more than once, and that is on that ship. So it's fitting that that it would carry them through their last voyage as well.
Shaw would have lost his shit if he got to go on the Enterprise D.
Oh my god!
Right?
He didn't even know
because he was an engineering geek.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. But the whole rescue was great. The fact that Picard had been running from the Borg for all this time, jacks himself into the collective again to save his own kid.
Beautiful.
And when he didn't think Jack was going to come out, he said, "It's okay. You want to stay? I'll stay." And that was him not being a captain or the savior of the galaxy. That was him being a dad.
And then
so
Troy with her through feeling her Imzadi. She's able to fly in there and
through the force.
Through the force and just get the best teleportation scene I've ever seen.
I loved watching the Enterprise sort of swing around.
Yeah, it drifted in. It drifted in and went. This whole sorry.
Right, because none of us knew what was going to happen there. Were we going to have a massive sacrifice of these incredible characters to save the galaxy once and for all? Right? So were they going to die? What was going to happen? And then they were ready to. It was like Worf, he's like, it is a good day to die. They were ready to go. And then he's like, Riker's like, I'll be waiting I'll be waiting with our son for you, Imzadi.
I know. And it was at that moment she was like,
yeah,
she knew.
So good. So good. So they save the day. The Enterprise D, they get the charges dropped for, stealing a spaceship by Admiral Tuvok, and Seven gets promoted to captain. And what does she get to be captain of? The newly rechristened Enterprise G, which used to be the Titan A. And on board, we get First Officer Raffi and Special Counsel Ensign Jack Crusher.
So is he the counselor, like Counselor Troy?
No, he's special counsel. Like, it's like we're in this part of space, and it's like we don't know what's going on. Do you have any experience? That kind of thing.
So he's like a Neelix.
Oh yeah, I guess. Oh, I never thought about that.
Why'd you have to say it like that? Oh.
But you're right. That's weird. Oh no,
he is Tuvix.
Oh man, yeah. So we find out that Captain Seven is the captain of the Enterprise G, and that's so fitting for that character. What do you think of how this show ended? We'll talk about the post credits in a couple seconds. Oh, and then after that, the crew of the Enterprise D. I'm trying not to get all sad and happy at the same time. They end up going to 10 forward and having a card game like they did at the end of TNG.
All good things.
All good things. Yeah.
Yeah.
What'd you guys think of how that ended?
Great way of bookmarking it and bringing it full circle again. Because even at that like with the way they ended it on All Good Things, and that it was the captain sitting down for the very first time with the screw to play, poker, and he's like, I should have done this a long time ago. And then you get this recap where it's like they're all happy and joyful and that, and it's like all the stresses are alleviated, and they're just
being friends. They're being a family.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And I love the way they filmed it with the extended scene and that with the music playing over it while they just laugh and drink and play cards.
I'll tell you about the behind the scenes of this sequence in a second.
Yeah.
What'd you think, Shows? You didn't talk about Seven, man.
Seven, yeah. I mean, it was great. She's captain of that. So her character arc had, finally come full circle. And she's back in Starfleet where she belongs, where she should have been all along.
Agreed.
Even if she felt she didn't belong there on that, throughout most of the season because she didn't fit the rules.
Janeway should have been there.
So originally,
found a way. I know she was supposed to, but they should have found a way to bring her in there because that would have completely fixed that because she was always Seven's mentor.
But so was Tuvok.
True.
Tuvok.
Why did I say Tuvok? There's only one of them.
You're thinking Tuvix.
I blame Shells for saying Tuvix earlier.
Yes, I know. You cursed us.
But yeah, like it was the whole Seven thing was super awesome. I think that from the moment we saw Jerry Ryan appear in season 1, and she goes, "You owe me a ship, Picard," and then at the end of season 3, here's your ship, the Enterprise G.
That's fair.
Right, it's pretty cool, and like the fact that the Enterprise D gets like a proper, like gets the place of honor that it deserves instead of just half of it exploding and the other half just sitting on a planet. Like that ship had so much, has done so much for the galaxy, saved so many people, given us so many adventures. Now it gets to be taken care of. Like Geordi will take good care of it.
I didn't know about that. Yeah.
So I like the idea that that sort of tied up that loose end with that ship, and they even did like the end of a sitcom, like the end of Friends. They shut off the lights, and they walk out of the main set, right?
Yeah,
it's like that. It was cool. The poker game was just like it was the opposite of what I was worried about, which was that they were all going to just die, and they were going to die in an honorable way, but they were going to die, and that's how they were going to end the series. Instead, that was their last adventure, but it doesn't mean that they're all dead. Now they can sit back and enjoy their retirement and relax without having to, be, I don't know, hunted or killed or whatever. Yeah.
I can't add to that. You guys knocked that out. So the reason why that last scene, the poker scene, felt so real is because they filmed it for an hour. Terry Metalis was like, you know what? Just play cards. Just have fun, guys. And they just ended up just screwing around and playing cards. So that's just them being them, and
That's
you could
awesome.
tell how close this cast.
That's a real cast reunion right there. We're watching.
We're seeing friends actually just screw around with each other. That's such a good way.
Yeah.
Post credit scene or mid credit scene technically, because we see the Enterprise G in front of the sun or a sun. And
this is the part that bugged me that I talked about earlier.
Yeah, I know that's why, but I love this part.
We're gonna get into that.
And Jack is settling into his quarters. He has a little
puts a little
golden Enterprise D, which no one wanted at the first episode, right? No one wanted the fat ones, and then which is even more clever that they saved the day with the fat chip. I didn't even think about how that called back to that. Anyway, and he puts down a picture of Patrick Stewart and Crusher at a 90s premiere, which I thought was amusing. And then
that picture was the two actors, right?
And we hear a familiar voice, and that is of Q, who had died in season 2 but is back and telling Jack that while his father's adventures are done, his trial has just begun. Picard. Not Picard.
Make it so.
Listen, I've said it before, and I will say it again. The Q are an unfathomable race, in that as much as we think we know about them, we don't. You know, and the fact that one died and now has come back, it somehow it doesn't make sense, but it makes perfect sense in that we don't know. He got bored, as my brother said when we were watching. It's like he got bored of death and came back.
Yep.
You know, which is something Q would do.
He's the dot.
Yeah, he's the dot on the eye of the Jeremy Bearimy.
Exactly.
What more do you need to know? It's like, and John Delancey's back as Q in that. It's like that's amazing. All I ever wanted. Yeah, that's all I ever want.
Shows
right.
So I love Q. I love John Delancey. I think that part was awesome to see him. And I get what's going on. This is kind of a River Song situation.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like we're not quite when he talks about seeing things so linearly, right? It's like maybe he did die, but did he die before or after, or where? You know, like who knows when that would happen? But in terms of the storyline, it made the end of season 2 feel cheap. Like it that was a very touching ending when Picard and Q were able to have that sit down. And they were so vital to each other's characters and their stories and Picard could be there for Q when Q was finally ending his journey, and that was an important moment for me watching the show. And then for him just to appear and go, "Nah, I'm not really dead. You just don't get it." It bugged me a little bit. Will I be okay if there's more Q episodes? Sure, I will happily see more Q episodes. I just feel like if you're going to do that, then why did we go this direction in the first place? But I mean, it wasn't necessarily season 3 writers handling the season 2 content and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, but I mean, like that's just atypical in that we got Data's death at the end of season 1, but Data is back, and we're glad. Yeah, we had Q's death, which was touching, you know, and especially like the moment between him and Picard in season 2. But you know, again. That was season 2. This is season 3.
I just don't want to see Picard and Q back together because I think that would make it even worse.
I think that's done. And to be honest, I don't think we'll ever see Patrick Stewart back in the role again.
No, me neither. Well, you never know. He might show up as an admiral one day, just randomly, like as a message to the people, like you know, going off. They did it with James Cromwell at the beginning of Enterprise, right? I didn't expect to see him back. True. Yeah, so I think just one more thing before we do our season rating is what really made this series special for me was the music, because they didn't score this like any other Star Trek show I had ever seen. They scored this movie, this whole series like a giant movie. Like it felt so cinematic and epic all the time, and it astounds me how beautiful the music was of this show. You don't have to add it onto this, but you can if you want to. No,
the music was great, and the music was always important to the series, and that from like like the galloping theme song and that to like the little bits of incidental music they always included. It was great, and the way they handled it was fantastic. I know there was a bit of controversy when James Russo didn't return in that because he had done the music for the first 2 seasons, I think. But like this was more cinematic and movie quality, and more fitting to the tone of this season.
Yeah, I ended up talking to Stephen Barton and Frederick Weidman last week, and they were talking about how they created way more music for this than anything they had ever done before. They scored it like an actual movie, an actual 10-hour movie. It's available now, so you should definitely check out this soundtrack. I don't know, Chefs, did you have anything to add about the music? No,
just that it was awesome.
You should listen to it. Vinyl comes out in a week.
Like it's apparently been getting a lot of play on Spotify.
It's number one in soundtracks on everything, which is well deserved because what I think I'm going to do my final rating, and this goes for the music and the whole show. This show took they took the legacy of Star Trek. They didn't shit on it. They added to it in a meaningful way, and they made it better. And I don't think I've ever seen a series come back after such a long time and end the way in such a fitting way. Right? It was my hope for the sequel trilogy of Star Wars, but it didn't happen. This is everything I wanted the sequel trilogy of Star Wars to be.
Yeah.
And I'm happy as a fan. I give this a 9 out of 10. Hawk.
For me, this was like a 10 out of 10. Like
my issue was a changing switch to Borg.
Yeah.
Right at the end.
Yeah.
It makes sense, but it hurt my feelings as a DS9 fan.
10 out of 10, just in pure satisfaction on that. Like as I said, week by week, this was just it defied all my expectations and that, and as burned as I was by the first 2 seasons, it is how happy I was that they pulled this off. The 8th season of TNG.
Exactly.
10 out of 10, 100%. Loved it. Loved it more than any other Star Trek season I think I've ever seen.
I agree.
And I think, being someone who's, goes all the way back to the very beginning, like when my uncle first showed me the original series and stuff, like this was created by people who definitely had a reverence for the show, for the universe, for the fans, who didn't try to cheapen anything out. It wasn't like Star Trek Beyond where they had to add a motorcycle race scene and all that kind of stuff. Like it was,
or Into Darkness when they just had to go back to the Well of Khan.
Yeah. They were like they knew who the fans were. They knew that the fans were smart, and the fans were people that adored the I guess use the word legacy of the show, and they made something really special. This will definitely get a Blu-ray spot on my shelf.
100%. I'm gonna change mine to 9.5, purely because I had a conversation with my parents. What was it, on Friday? They had finally seen it on Friday night, and they're the ones that introduced me to Star Trek. I didn't even get to talk to you about this because I was telling Hawk last week that I'm excited to hear from them because when I was 6 in 1987 and TNG premiered, they were the ones who were like, we should come in and we should watch this. And I was on my swing set in my backyard. I came in and we had pulled out the pull-out couch in our basement. We put on TNG, and this was the thing that we would do every Sunday.
Counter at Farpoint.
Every Sunday. And I remember seeing TOS on TV after school, but it was nothing. Like, it was on TV. I was like, I don't get this. It wasn't in order, so I didn't understand what was going on. But but TNG was the one where like every week we watched it together. And to talk to my parents on Friday about the show and how much they enjoyed it, and they were talking to my older sister who didn't really care about Star Trek at that time or even now, and they're like, you have to watch the show. You have to watch how good it ends. And I was just sitting there, I was watching my parents geek out about something, and they don't geek out about anything. Although my dad does dress up as Geordie LaForge every Halloween. It's cute seeing. It's cute. it means a lot to me to see my parents enjoy this as much as they did. Were they a little bit weirded out that the change happened so fast at the end? I did, yeah, but they didn't care because they really liked seeing that crew kick ass and that for that ship to come back. Like they were so happy that ship came back. I'm gonna tell you one more story. Did I ever tell you that my parents went to Las Vegas Star Trek, the experience, and they didn't bring me? I was a teenager. What? I could have gone.
What?
And they're like, we'll bring you back something. I was like, but I what? And they brought me back.
Did they bring a keychain?
They brought me back a Borg cup and a hat that says Star Trek Experience. I was like, I will be there 1 year, and then it closed. And I was like, I'm never going to it. That's how big of fans I guess they are. Is that they would go to a Star Trek exhibit without me.
Plus, they probably wanted to gamble too.
They went with friends too. I guess that's fine. I guess. Yeah. I'm glad we got to talk about Picard. I know we were so excited about this season, and it blew all our expectations away. We should play Star Trek. Was it Bridge Commander?
Bridge Crew.
It's on PlayStation. You should play it with us.
Yeah, I just downloaded Star Trek Online, so I haven't fired it up yet. But
it's terrible.
I have Star Trek Online on my PS5 right now too. It's not terrible. It's fun.
No, it's not. It's terrible.
It's fun.
I'll play it with you guys though.
Yes. Yes. It's terrible if you play it by yourself.
That I agree with. It's boring if it is that. Anyway,
but if you're going on missions with your friends, come on.
It's true.
How cool is that?
It's true. It's just it's clunky. We'll talk about this afterwards. Anyway, for thank you guys for coming and talking about Star Trek and Mando. It's late and I'm tired, so we're gonna go. Thank you guys out there for listening to us. We'll see you soon. Goodbye.
Bye.
Hey.
Well, that's it for us this week on Geeks with Kids. If you want to get a hold of us, you can send us an email at podcast@geekswithkids.ca. And don't forget to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/geekswithkids. Follow us on Twitter at geekswithkidscn. Check out our pics on Instagram at geekswithkids. And you can find all of this good stuff on our website at www.geekswithkids.ca. So if you like what you hear, why don't you hit that subscribe button and leave us a comment. This podcast can be found on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, and your favorite podcasting app. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.